Now, in that scenario, she was not taking me with her.
Mm.
So, but I had to go with her. She drugged me with her to move, and we probably lived about, when I say we lived, we were apart from my father. At least I was, let's put it this way. She was separated. They were separated for probably about a year. But during that time frame, I spent more time with my father than I did with my mother.
Mm.
I kept running home. It was my home. And I just consider the dynamics, right, between the two of them. And I hated her. I didn't want to be with
Mm.
her. And
Mm.
I wanted to be, with. I wanted to be at my house where my dog was, just where my life was, even
Mm.
though it was not a good scene. My dad was not in a good place, and probably got worse during that time frame, as far as
But she ended
drinking.
up going back to him. She ended up going back to him, though.
Yeah, and guess who got blamed for that? Me.
You? Yeah.
Yeah, she told me that the only reason why she got back with my father was because her daughter was running wild.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit. Interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. There's nothing more fascinating to me about this earth than the people who inhabit it. My mission is to create deep, vulnerable, and open conversations that invite our unique guests to share the arc of their ever-evolving journey through life, in the hope that their stories inspire and resonate with you, our listeners. I'm your host, Scott Tajarian. Welcome to the Weekly Transit. I'm here with my guest, Jean Watroba. Jean is a writer. She wrote a series of poems in this book, Pretend All Is Well. Pretend All Is Well, a collection of poems from a daughter of an unintended alcoholic father and inevitable narcissistic mother by the parentified daughter who willingly punished herself. It's a very vulnerable title to your collection of poems, Jean. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Scott, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me, before we get started, I just want to clue our listeners into your primal triad. Jean was born with the sun and moon in Taurus and the ascendant in Leo. So that's the primal triad for Jean. Full fixed, all three fixed signs. Uh, so tell me, like, what is it? What does an unintended alcoholic father mean? What is that?
The way I see it is, I don't know that anybody intends to be an alcoholic, right?
Mm.
Um, the way that I see my father is he was a salesman. He
Mm-hmm.
grew up on a farm, so he was the only one who ventured out of either. I'm from Western Pennsylvania, so there's, the steel mills were there, and mining were big, or farming. There was some farming in there as well, but mostly mining and steel mills. And so he went to business school back then. Maybe a year. It wasn't university. It was just some kind of program. But anyway, he got into sales, and back in the 50s and 60s, it was martini lunches. And and my father wasn't a naturally outgoing person. So I
Mm-hmm.
think as part of his,
Sales was tough.
what's that?
Sales was tough then, I imagine,
Yeah,
being in sales.
I don't. He did not have. Again, I think the alcohol, the times people drank. That was part of the whole war. Mad Men. I mean, you think about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he drank during the day, and as things went wrong in life, I think that it just got worse.
Hmm.
Um, He had gone through a period where his division was eliminated or something, and they were selling it. And long story short is he ended up buying a hardware store. We had a fire, we had a flood, and things just really went. And there's a poem. I have one of my poems in there about it. So,
Which poem is that?
it would be, yeah, it is. It's a heart under siege.
A Heart Under Siege.
Yeah.
There was a time when you were both daddy and dad. It was a kinder world. Wishes and dreams came true, memories of sunshine and warm breezes too. Then came the fire. Wishes turned to ashes. The clouds rolled in, skies opened wide. Flood currents carried your dreams downstream. Water and fire, destroyers of wishes and dreams, all reduced to rubble. The place your weary soul slumbered, a terminal diagnosis awoke your spirit. Father Time sighed as time flew by. On the other side of a road, vulnerable and alone, your heart under siege, attacked one last time. There's a lot of vulnerability or empathy in that poem. Empathy for your dad and what he was going through.
I'm glad you got that from that poem, because there are a lot of poems in which I don't feel the empathy, right? Because there's a lot of pain. I wanted
Mm.
to, for both of my parents in this book, to write at least one poem where I did have that empathy. I understood that they both, came from their backgrounds, whether he was, his being, again, that switch between in the family, stepping outside of the mold, and just the challenges with that. And then, what he went through. He was a good guy. He was a kind guy. He had a good heart. As a
Mm.
matter of fact, when he had the store and he was going through, the flood hit Johnstown bad. Johnstown was known for big floods, and 1977 was the last one, and
Mm.
it tore apart. A lot of people died and tore apart the town,
Wow.
but a lot of people didn't have money, and so he was giving away things in the hardware store, and a
Mm.
bridge went out. There was no, like, lost half the business of people being able to get to the store. So he went down helping people, but that basically was the thing that took him under, was that.
Mm.
So yeah, so I do have empathy for that.
Yeah. When was your dad's birthday?
January 12th, 1937.
January 12th, 1937. Hmm. So he's a Capricorn. Do you
Mm-hmm.
know the time of birth or no?
Mm-mm.
No.
Unfortunately not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So, his Saturn, when he was born, Saturn was at 18 degrees in Pisces.
Mm,
Your Chiron is at 18 degrees in Pisces. Chiron's the wound,
right.
the ancient wisdom which is unlocked through healing that wound. So it's almost like, because Saturn is the planet of responsibility or reality, he created the reality of your wound.
Yeah.
You have a wound to the unconscious and to intimacy, but you have ancient wisdom in that area as well.
Interesting.
And your father, with his Saturn at the same degree as your wound, sort of like activated that in a way that felt real. And yeah.
Yeah, it was crushing. I mean, I was daddy's little girl, and I have a poem about that as well.
Hmm.
When things had, shifted, um, and well,
What's that
this is
poem
actually the
called?
poem that I think about, because I started out that he was both daddy and dad. So there was a time when everything was going well, and he was there. He was there for
Hmm.
me, and then
Yeah.
then he wasn't. So, and for a
Hmm.
long time. So
Hmm.
That was definitely.
His Chiron was at 18 degrees in Gemini, so squaring your Chiron, and his Neptune was at 18 degrees in Virgo. So his Chiron, his Saturn, and his Neptune were all aligning with your Chiron. Neptune's the planet of the unconscious, the
Right.
planet of illusion, deception, compassion, intuition. It's the planet that rules alcohol. Just as Pisces, the sign where his Saturn was and where your Chiron is the sign that rules alcohol. So, that could be an indication of, why alcoholism was a big part of his life and your relationship with him. You were also born with Neptune in the fourth house,
Mm-hmm.
which is 16
Scorpio.
degrees in Scorpio. Yeah, which aligns with his Neptune and Saturn. But that Neptune in the fourth house can indicate, maybe alcoholism in the home because Neptune rules alcohol, or Pisces, which rules alcohol. Neptune rules Pisces, which rules alcohol.
Maybe it was
So
intended.
it
After
was
all,
intended.
right? I mean,
It
this
was
is what this
intended.
was good.
I wanted to be, uh, delicate with you, and because I know this is very sensitive information, and uh, it's a lot for you to put this out there, and to want to come on and share about what you experienced as a child, which is heartbreaking. But in the introduction, you said they were deeply flawed, and the thing is when I look at your chart, I see it as your parents. They did exactly what they were supposed to do for you to have the experiences you were meant to have. So, though we can look at them as flawed because, nobody, I don't think, wants to be or have an alcoholic father or a narcissistic mother. At the same time, it's part of the program, because you were born with your astrological code, and the people that made you, your parents, are the ones who are sort of playing all of those notes in the
Yes,
beginning part of your life. Yeah.
they did a good
So,
job. They definitely challenged me.
yes.
Yeah.
What is yeah, go ahead.
No,
What were
no,
you
you
going to
go.
say?
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, what does an unintended narcissistic mean? Inevitable.
Inevitable.
Inevitable narcissistic mother. What was the inevitability about
My
that?
grandmother. This is generational, for
Mm,
sure. My grandmother was. I won't say that she was a malignant narcissist. She could have had borderline personality disorder. She definitely had personality disorder,
mm,
undiagnosed.
yeah.
But she was a very interesting woman. I actually wrote a very long poem about her, which I will publish at some point.
Okay.
It was the first poem that I wrote. I actually never
Mm,
intended to write poetry. I was going to write a children's book and gave up on it and got tired and started journaling, and then all of a sudden I was writing poems. So it
and
was,
this poured out of you?
yes, oh my god, it was like I channeled through. Like it
Yeah,
was, I didn't know where
exactly.
it came from. I mean, I know now, but I mean, looking back, but at the time, I just started writing and wrote for months and
Yeah.
put it down for a year, and then came back to it and scaled it back a little bit, got more focused and raw in it.
Hmm.
But no, my grandmother was, well, first of all, my grandmother loved me. She lived vicariously through me. She hated my
Mhm.
mother.
Hmm.
She wasn't very kind to, uh, let's just say, uh, I don't want to talk too much about family members because the book's about me, but I'm okay with talking about my grandmother.
Yeah.
She was very cruel to my mother. And
Mm.
I mean, let's just say that um, it wasn't, see, narcissism isn't about physically beating somebody, right?
Mhm.
It's mental, it's emotional. and she would literally say things, I don't love you, I don't even like you, things, and in a very coarse way, and just the way that she would treat her. My mother had a story. I think it's called Infatago or something. It's some kind of um, I don't even know, a virus or something that produces scabs on your face. So my grandmother, instead of one of my mother's famous stories, which I'm surprised that I can't think of more at the moment because I heard them throughout my life, her talking about her stories, because she was the forever victim. And I remember my mother saying that she had scab on her one eyebrow, and it went away. She lost her eyebrow. My grandmother still insisted on sending her to school. And, she dressed her in clothes that were the complete opposite of what other kids were wearing. I mean, it was very cruel to her.
It's like she wanted to embarrass her or
Yes.
something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
My grandmother never wanted to be a mother. She wanted everything to be about her. But that was
How did
back
that
in the
happen?
early 30s, maybe. She got married, 20s.
And so she was married and got pregnant, but didn't really want to have kids.
Well, let's just say there's an interesting part of that story that we know for sure that my mother's brother, who was a year older than her, so was my grandfather's son. The theory that was confirmed, but never talked about, that my mother was the daughter of a Nazi German.
How did that happen?
My grandmother wanted to go to New York, and she was very what's the word I'm looking for? Great, not great. She wanted her way. She wanted her way, and that was it. And she did not want to be married, and she was making my grandfather miserable, and she wanted to go to New York, and so he let her go to New York. And I can't remember how long she spent in New York, but she came home pregnant.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm. My mother was born, again, 30s. She was same year, as old as my father.
So then wait, when's your mom's birthday?
19. Sorry, her birthday is the 28th of November, same year, 37.
November 28th. So that's Sagittarius.
Yes.
That's do you know when your grandmother's birthday is?
I don't.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like your grandmother, I guess, had a one night stand, or she.
No, my mother
She had a
said that
love
she
affair.
remembers a day in the park when she was about 5, and my grandmother introduced her to somebody. And now this is her memory, but she had nobody told her a story, but she remembered meeting somebody in a uniform.
And that was her father.
Mm-hmm.
So she had
Nothing
a
like my
love
grandfather.
affair. She had a love affair. She looks nothing like your grandfather.
Mm-mm.
And so she had a love affair with another man in New York, but there was maybe some bitterness from your grandmother towards your mom because she's a reminder of that relationship that didn't go maybe the way
That was
she
my guess.
wanted it to
That's
go.
what I believed all this
Yeah.
time, is that every time she looked at her, it was maybe she was the reason that she had to go home, because she became pregnant. And so she, I mean, this is something to surmise, but knowing my grandmother and what, I mean, she was wild as a child. My grandmother was. She was like one of, I think, 13 children. And she was
Wow.
known as I think she stopped school in junior high. She didn't go to high school. And but a lot of the family did. So she just was. She was definitely the black sheep in the family, if you want to call it that. But she wanted her own way, and I don't know if she got married before or after with my her oldest, her first child. So I don't know that part of the story, but she definitely did not ever want to be married. She did not have, and she, my mother was not the only one who was not. Um,
The who was like an illegitimate child or something,
yeah,
right? Is
yeah.
that
My
yeah?
grandmother, yeah, she liked to have her own fun
Uh-huh,
in
uh-huh.
her own way. So, but yeah, there's it was a. I can tell you that my grandmother ended up having Parkinson's, and I have this memory of she was in a nursing home, and my mother would always insist that when I came home that we would go visit my grandmother together. So it was a very uncomfortable situation because my grandmother would lavish me with love and just praise and laugh with me. And my mother would be sitting behind me, quiet. And so I was in the middle, but she felt she had to go see her mother. And I don't know why she did that, because to me that's torture, right?
Hmm.
To watch your mother treat your daughter in a way that was 180 degrees different than you were treated, right? And it just was so uncomfortable. I could feel the energy of really my grandmother not paying her an ounce of attention, but my mother sort of staring through, not staring through me as much as like a completely different person than she normally would be. She was that child again, right?
Hmm.
She was that very quiet child who was just trying to please her mother, and that was through silence.
Hmm. Parkinson's is fear and an intense desire to control everything and everyone.
Hmm.
Does that sound like your
Very
grandmother?
much so. Hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, it sounds like your mom was very vulnerable with you when she was around her mom
Hmm.
because, like, her mom just kind of put her down and had her under her thumb or controlled her. But your mom is a Sagittarius sun,
Hmm.
and her sun squares your Saturn and Uranus. Those are two very challenging
Yeah.
aspects where your mom might have felt restricted by you, an inability for her to be independent with you in the picture. So that's maybe some of the tension you experience with your mom
When you say
in your
independent, you mean independent from me, away from me, or yeah.
like like so on one hand with her son squaring your Saturn, she might have felt restricted by you, like
Mm-hmm.
she couldn't be free, she couldn't do what she wanted to do. That your Uranus squaring her sun meant that you might have, from her perspective, might have been rebellious in a way that was not uh, didn't feel good to her. Where she's feeling restricted by you, but then you're also rebelling against her. So,
That makes a lot of sense because, well, she never received love. I mean, my grandfather showed her some love, but of course, I shouldn't say of course, but he was also very strict. But he protected her at times when she needed it, when he was around. I should say, not that he wasn't around in her life, but uh, she. Where was I going with that? Um, I kind of went off into seeing my grandfather pictures because I never met my grandfather. He was passed
hmm,
before I oh, the whole independent thing. She did not. Uh, she didn't mother.
hmm,
She didn't mother. She did. She thought she did, and
hmm.
I know I have something in there in my poems about that. She just talked about
Which one
how
is that? Which poem is that?
I think. Deceived might be it.
Deceived. So this is interesting. The poem titled "Deceived," and hearing, the fact that it's unclear your ancestry, because
Mm.
we don't really know who your grandfather was, and that is indicative of that fourth house Neptune.
Oh.
Because Neptune is the cloudy planet, and the fourth house is the house of home, which is, means that there might be confusion or illusion or deception with regards to your ancestry, your upbringing, your bloodline. So your poem Deceived says, her mother vindictive, no skills to nurture, a heart void of love. My mother insisted she was different, she was better. She bestowed a real love. This lie I believed. Of course, she deceived. Her love buried deep inside existed only to protect her inner child.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, she would tell me that she was trying hard, to be a better mother, and for her, that was, she didn't lay hands. Not that my grandmother. I don't know. I'm trying to remember because there are things that you pack away. She did
Mm-hmm.
handle her. Whether she beat her or not, she definitely did handle her. And physically, the things that she would allow her, just to uh, allow her to be made fun of, which is really
Mm.
kind of odd considering my grandmother was very, very, she was beautiful and very vain. So usually a narcissist, when they look at their daughter, um, or even their sons, it's usually an extension of them, and they want them to represent them, in such the way. But with my mother, she just didn't like her just so much. She didn't like her at all. So with me, my mother was the exact opposite, where she did everything that she could to make sure that I looked good.
Mm.
I mean, from there's, I have another poem in there. There was a memory from the time, I want to say I was probably 4.
What
And
poem is that?
if it's a dream, it's just a dream.
Yeah, that's what it is. I'll read that.
Okay.
So this is the poem, A Dream is Just a Dream. They wanted a girl, their dream come true, dressed like a doll. It was a must I be perfect. He didn't care about my hair or the clothes I wore, but my hair would curl. The look on her face told the tale. Not her dream, little girl. Eventually, both were barely there. Real life conspired. The glory of me expired. Sure, it was their dream. Sometimes a dream is just a dream.
There was that there's a lot of places where that comes from, but my the thing about my hair not curling, because I have very straight hair. And I mean, she pestered me most of my, I would say, through probably even my 30s. You need a perm. You need a perm. You need more body in your hair. Your hair, like my hair needs to look better. And I'm a Leo rising, so my hair is important to me. So I have had a battle with my hair my whole life, and so her constantly picking at my hair drove me crazy. And so I did everything that she told me not to do with my hair. So, but when I was probably about 4, I remember she did this thing that was very, it was something that she was done. My mother did not have the same type of hair as me, but they would do the rags. I don't know, from movies. If you would see, they, instead of rollers, or of course we didn't have curling irons back then, they tie your hair up in rags. And so she did all the work, and then I slept on the rags. I woke up the next day. She put me in this cute little dress, took the rags out, and for a hot minute, my hair was curled. I swear to God, she turned around and turned back, and her face just went down. And she looked at me and literally was mad at me because my hair wouldn't curl. It was one of those moments where you're so little and you clearly disappointed that you just can. I mean, it was in her face. She's a very expressive face, and I got a very expressive face from her. There's a lot of traits in myself that I have.
Do you know what time she was born?
I don't.
Well, she is a Libra moon. Your dad was your dad's probably a Capricorn moon, but Libra moons can have like kind of very expressive faces, kind of elastic faces. I notice in Libra moons because they talk a lot.
Yes,
They
and
yeah,
yes. Oh,
and
excessively.
yeah, they're emotionally fulfilled by sharing with other people, and so their faces are kind of like elastic because they spend so much time talking.
100%,
Yeah,
absolutely. She
yeah.
was. There's the poem. Gosh, I wish I could remember my own poems for crying out loud. But it's towards the end, and it is the one where listening with intent.
I was just gonna say that listening with intent. Okay, so
Yeah, that was.
listening with intent. Once a week, she called like clockwork. My phone perched on shoulder, she talked endlessly about everything and nothing. I heard myself after she passed out loud, and in my mind, her voice quiet. I could hear mine like her, only my voice could be heard. Horrified, I scrutinized, observed my selfishness. I hurt others as she did me, a communication of disrespect. Surely what friends and family had come to expect. I'm conscious now, listening with intent, catching myself. I ask others to please share. We all need to know we do indeed matter.
I mean,
Yeah.
literally, she would talk for. And sometimes I feel like I'm just bashing on my mother, but there's there's there's, as you were saying earlier, there's a lot of pain behind it, and I'll explain in a minute. Remind me that I want to talk about that turning point whenever I realized she was uh, as much had as much of an impact on me dysfunctionally as my father. My father was very
Mm,
clear. He was an alcoholic. It was easy. But anyway, so my mother would call and she would just literally talk endlessly for 45 minutes, like I said. And at the very end, she would say, "So, how are you?" And by then, I'm exhausted and I
yeah.
really didn't want to share with her anyway. And I'd say, "I'm fine." "Oh, good.
Mm,
Okay, talk to you later." And that would be the end of it. And,
mm,
you get used to it, even though you're used to it every single time. You think to
mm,
yourself, thanks for asking. You know,
mm.
um, yeah, that
And
was.
what was the turning point you said?
I had therapy. I was in therapy. This was my third try at therapy, and I made it stick. And
Mm,
I originally went because I wanted to figure out why I couldn't have a healthy relationship. I had wanted
mm,
to get married, wanted to have kids, and didn't accomplish either one.
mm,
And you could probably read through all through the charts as to why that didn't happen. But yeah, so it took me. Uh, I had a few health crises in the midst of therapy, which took me off course of why I was there to begin with. But you can also wonder, if the health crises that I had weren't connected to what I was connecting to in therapy. It was just
Mm.
something.
You were pulling something out.
Yeah. I mean, literally, I had a hysterectomy, no children, right? No chance of
Mm.
having the children. And
Mm.
then I had an issue with my eyes, which, my therapist kept asking me, what don't I want to see? Which I
Mhm.
still have autoimmune disease in my eyes, which is getting better, ironically, and
Mm.
things got better when my mother passed, but that's another part of the story. Anyway, I had a problem with my eyes where I had inflammation, so I had to go back on
Mhm.
steroids, and I'm actually now deemed allergic to steroids, so
Oh,
I
wow.
cannot have inflammation, which most people do, because prednisone knocks out inflammation quickly, but my body cannot handle it. So I went through a course, and when I do that, I can't function. I horseback ride. I couldn't ride my horse. I couldn't.
Mm.
I couldn't figure out my ability to. Do I use my left hand? Do I use my right hand? And it was bizarre. And thankfully, she was a very patient horse. But
Mm.
um, part of that story is that I was in between jobs while this was happening, and it was very difficult to work while I was going through this. Uh, so I came off of my steroids, and as I was coming off of my steroids, this is in 2018, I got clarity. I don't know where and what it just. I guess it popped at some point, and I
Mm.
started to record on my way home from therapy on my phone. I would record memos. I would record, what did I get in therapy that day? What
Mm.
clicked, and what didn't I want to forget? Well,
Mm.
I recorded on June 8th. It's still on my phone. 2018. That was the day that it clicked. That
Wow.
she was the that she didn't like me.
Mm.
That my mother was, that she was narcissistic. She was, you call her a narcissist. She was a narcissist. She was covert. And so that this whole journey in writing these poems, um, I couldn't find anything that was written, recorded, that spoke to me, that could say, why are you the way that you are? Why are you this way? Of course, I could have talked
Mm.
to you and had you read my chart, and you could have helped me out. but I was figuring this out myself, and of course through therapy. But it was a journey of, and that's really why I was in therapy, was why couldn't I live my life the way that I wanted to? And part of that was, okay, so my dad was an alcoholic. I had read books, I had journaled, I had talked about that in therapy before, but something was missing, right? There was a missing element of this, and it was my mother. And I can look back, even as a kid, she never hugged me. Not that other kids haven't gone through this, people, but there was an element of, I didn't even want her to touch me when I was a
Mm.
teenager. Like, she brushed by me, it was like, ew, just
Mm.
get away from me. And so that might fall into the place when you were talking about independent, where I did
Mm.
not want her around me.
Exactly.
I mean, she
Yes.
created that,
Mhm.
and then I wanted nothing to do with her. Um, so um, yeah, so in that time frame, in June, the irony of that is that she got diagnosed with cancer a few months before. So I'm
Wow.
in the process of trying to. I knew I wasn't going to go 100% no contact, but I was trying to reduce contact at a
Mm.
time that usually you would go towards the parent.
Mm.
Thankfully, I
Mhm.
have two other siblings, and one stepped up and stepped in and took care of it and was
Are
there
the
for
other
her.
Yeah. Oh, go
No,
ahead.
you go ahead.
Well, do the other siblings have a similar relationship with your parents, or
No, they're
is it
boys.
yeah, It's different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, couple interesting notes here is, in June 8th, 2018, the sun was squaring your Chiron. So it was bringing light, maybe an uncomfortable light, an insight to your wound.
Mm-hmm.
Your wound your wound that you maybe had been unconscious of, and how it affects your intimacy, your sense of vulnerability. While Chiron was squaring your north node, your soul's purpose.
Yeah.
So the wound squaring your soul's purpose, which the interesting thing about your book of poems is, you can see how writing is something that you're able to do because Mercury, the planet of the mind, is conjunct near to the same degree as your Mars, the planet of action, and your Moon, the planet of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and it's aligning with your Venus, the planet of the senses, and it's aligning with your North Node. Now, your North Node is in Cancer,
Yeah.
sign that rules the past. So you're meant to delve into the past, to really nurture yourself in a way that you were not cared or nurtured for as a child. And writing about it with Mercury, Mars, and the Moon all in the ninth house, which is the house of philosophy, you're sharing your philosophical view of the world based on your self-worth and values
Mm-hmm.
as it's reflected through your past.
That is something that I've looked at myself. And, when I started to write, the one thing when I started to incorporate astrology with what had happened to me at, these different events, different time frames, looking at, what happened when I was this age, because, learning, where we're, and those, of course, are my personal planets, but, what was happening, especially with the outer planets, to see what was the longer term impact and how they did then connect, obviously, with my personal planets. But I did, as I was writing, I was like, wow, my Mercury's in the ninth house. And, here I am, my moon is in, and thinking about the feelings and, not even looking at the North Node aspect of it. I'm not, I'm a budding astrologer compared to you. But I certainly have, there's a lot that, that you can, once you start, once you start to learn, you start to dig and you listen to podcasts like yours and you learn more. But yeah, that's I always thought that I was meant to write, but I never thought I could never figure out what. I knew it had to do with empowerment and power, and that comes from being powerless.
Yeah. Did your dad have a difficult relationship with his father?
I think so. Mm-hmm.
Because it's interesting, like looking at your dad was born with his Chiron, his wound squaring Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the wound squaring the planet that represents the father. They're both at 18 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
His Chiron's at 18 in Gemini.
Wow.
His
Yeah.
at 18 in Pisces. Your mom was born with Chiron at 29 degrees in Gemini and Saturn at 28 degrees in Pisces. So both of your parents had Chiron, the wound, squaring the father. So both of your parents had a wound to the father.
Wow. I wonder if my mother had it with her father because he didn't save her.
Were you talking about the father who raised her or the biological father?
That raised her.
because
Ooh, ooh,
because I'm
yeah,
thinking like the
yeah.
wound is to the fact that her biological father wasn't a part of her life.
And I
There's
wonder
another man
how
raising
long it, because she had this picture. I thought this was very interesting. It was of a little girl who, was probably about 5 years old and dressed in the period
her.
clothing of when she was a little girl. And she was leaning up against the door, and she was, looking backwards, and you could see that she was sad. And
Mhm.
she kept that picture until the very end
Mhm.
of her life.
Wow.
And of course, she's no longer here, so I can say this personal.
Yeah.
She literally had it hanging on her bathroom door. So when she was in her bathroom, she could see this picture. So she never got out of that space, that victim space from that age. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why I wrote about her, that child within from when she was 5, holding on to
Mhm.
that love. That's
Yes. Yes, it's like she was longing for the father that she didn't have.
mm-hmm. And I just wonder, and that's also the same age that she had said that she met um, this man.
Exactly.
And so, did my
Exactly.
grandmother say, "This is your father"? You know,
Yeah.
who
Exactly. Or she
knows?
knew intuitively, she just had a feeling,
Yeah.
this man was actually, so yeah.
And then also growing up and looking nothing. Like my grandfather was more of olive skin,
Mhm.
and so was my uncle. I'll say that my the firstborn. And when you look at his kids and the kids in my family, now my father was Polish, so we were,
Mhm.
50% of our blood definitely came um, from that ethnicity. But we had nothing. I mean, she had nothing from her father, from the father
Yeah.
who raised her. So, yeah, I would think with a mother like that, knowing what she knew, and I don't know how young. I don't know how young she was when she was old enough to wonder about the because I don't think that my grandmother actually spilled the beans until she was drinking wine one night. I won't say who she was drinking the wine with, but she was
Mm.
drinking wine with somebody and spilled the beans about the German officer,
Mhm.
and the role.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
but anyway, back to the part about writing the story, writing the poems, and that period, and my uh, not incentive, but the heart behind writing it was there were two parts to it. One was for me, it was very therapeutic,
Mm.
very painful because you had to look back intently and look
Mm.
at what was my, what happened, uh, seeing their faces. The one poem, I think it's co-conspirator, or I think it might be, where I'm sitting in the living room. My father is, on the couch on one end, and I'm over on a love seat, and I can see him. He's opening the cabinet, he's pulling out the whiskey, and he's pouring himself a
Mm.
cup or a glass, and looking down the hallway. We both are
Mm.
to see if my mother was coming.
Yeah.
And so that feeling, those feelings, I should say, and then pulled together with eventually my mother, looking back at those moments, and again seeing his face, looking in his eyes, and like, are you with me? Are you going to protect me? Are you going to tell me if she's coming, down the
Mm.
hallway, kind of thing. Just that, no words spoken, but it was just understood that we both wanted quiet because she could
Yeah.
be very noisy,
Mhm.
very, very loud. and
Yeah.
and actually that was something that I avoided as a kid. was her incessant talk about not a positive talker in the Sagittarius sense, but very dramatic,
Blunt,
blunt,
harsh.
but also just um, it was something that I would say the drama was not equal to the situation. In other words, it did not. Um, did her reaction? Did the situation warrant her reaction? Um, I did have. I will say this: my brother, when he was probably about 15, went off with his friends, went camping for like 4 days, and my mother, reported him missing, and she cried and screamed for 4 days. Meanwhile,
Mm,
my other brother, we were walking around saying he's probably out partying with his friends, camping,
mm,
and that's where he was. But she
yeah.
used that opportunity to, to be that drama queen, to be the center of attention. And, I'm pretty sure that was the moment in my life where I said, you know what, I will never do anything. I was quiet. I did not want to do anything that would make her like that because I'm sure there are many things that are underneath emotionally, but also I just didn't want to experience it. It was just annoying. And it made me mad.
Mm.
Yeah, actually.
Well, she's a Sagittarius, and so that's ruled by Jupiter,
Mm,
which is the planet of expansion.
right.
So it's that big expression. But you had said earlier, I don't know if it was before we started recording or after, but that you have similarities to your mom, and you have 3 planets in the ninth house, which is associated with the ninth sign, which is
Uh,
Sagittarius, including the moon, Mercury, and Mars. And then in the 10th house is the sun and Jupiter. And the 10th house is associated with the 10th sign, which is Capricorn, which is your
oh,
father
wow.
and moon. So that's the commonalities that you share with your parents. I also wanted to mention that on that June 8th, 2018, Uranus, the planet of the unexpected and revolution, was aligning with your Venus, your Mercury, your mind, your senses,
Hmm.
Mars, action, moon, emotions, and the North Node, the soul's purpose.
Wow.
So it was hitting all those points. That's why you had this sort of like wake up, like this, like awareness kind of out of nowhere. It felt like maybe.
That was one of the events, the transits that I thought the time frame where I wanted to look at what was going on with my
Mm.
chart with the transits to say there was something significant. There was something very significant about that day,
Oh
and
yeah.
that kind of trails back to or leads back to the purpose of the book was for me, but it was also for others who may have had a mother who, for all intents and purposes, on the outside looked like the best mom.
Mm.
She was there. I was gosh, I played softball. I was a majorette. I did everything in high school. I mean, and she was there, selling the donuts with me out, doing whatever she had to do to help. But it was very enthusiastic when you left the house, not so
Mm.
much in the house.
It was the show. It's like,
Yeah.
look at how great of a mom I am.
Well, and we were definitely middle class. I had thought we were upper middle class, but my one brother had corrected me and said, "No, we were pretty much middle class." But at the time, what the way that we lived and the things that my father the prizes and things that he would win as a salesman, because he was a very successful salesman back in those days. We had a swimming pool, we had horses, we had a good life, and then we didn't. And so the
Mm.
pretend all as well was not only just, my parents being my parents, but it was also, we went from having money to not having money.
Mm.
And so it was the double, I mean, there's
Yeah.
many things, many
Duality.
layers to this whole
Yeah.
thing.
And exactly. So that, hmm. That could be because of your moon conjunct Mercury, and the moon represents your past, and Mercury is the planet that rules Gemini, the twins.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
that can bring about some duality to the past or to your childhood. Was that because you lost everything because of the flood? Is that when things shifted, or?
That it actually shifted. I thought about this when I was about 9. And 9 was when my father, around that time, bought the hardware store. And my mother had to go back to work. And
Hmm.
she hadn't worked at all since I shouldn't say back to work. She went to work. She did work prior to them getting married and had worked in accounting and, so she went back, she went to work, and everything changed. Of course, that happens, right? A parent, a mother goes to work, and the kids' lives, change in many ways. But she just became much more angry and dramatic and loud. And every day she came home from work and just, I mean, it was like she was beating up my father every day to say, I have to go to work because of you, because you
Hmm.
chose this hardware store. I didn't want it. And so, so kids are always, sort of the ones who, are watching what's going on and, get, the bad end of it. It's like two people are fighting and, you're the one, you know, that's taken it all in. And unfortunately for me, I was the youngest and the only daughter. So I was trapped I call it trapped because I was controlled by her. Um, but anyway, the thing that I wanted, I'm going to get to this point. The thing that I wanted with the book was to provide something that would help somebody like me who had no idea what the hell was going on to
Hmm.
understand at least you can understand the alcoholism because there's so much written about it and everybody knows about alcoholism, and there's a lot of talk about narcissism, and probably the word's overused these days, but then again, people are very self-centered in a lot of ways today than probably in the past, and some of it's social media. But anyway, it was since I could never figure out what was going on with me, what was wrong. I did not know and understand that my mother was a covert narcissist, and marry that with my father, who was an alcoholic, and then their experience together, and with and what I went through with the two of them on that journey. Uh,
Hmm.
I wanted, I hope that this helps somebody else, that
Hmm.
they look at it
Yeah.
and can see themselves and know that their feelings are valid, and it may not look like, for example, whenever I told friends, about the book, and eventually when they read the book, and it would be a statement of, I thought I knew you. I
Hmm.
didn't know all this was going on. And I'm like, well, pretend
Yeah.
all is well, right? My mother
Yes.
was who she wanted you to see who she was.
Hmm.
In some ways, I carried that on,
Hmm.
but for different reasons.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I do hope it helps. Uh,
Well, I think that's part of your soul's purpose with the North Node in the 11th house, which is associated with the 11th sign, which is Aquarius, which represents the community. It's the house of friendship. And then with Mercury, Mars, and the moon aligning with your North Node from the ninth house, which is philosophy, it's like sharing your perspective,
mhm.
getting up there on the pulpit and, giving your sermon and sharing that with the community. That's what you're supposed to do
Yeah.
in a way that's kind and nurturing to others so that others you know feel the kindness and nurturing that you wished you had felt
Yes.
when you were a child. Yeah.
And the one thing that you don't know, that you don't know, that you're missing what you never had.
Hmm.
So I didn't know and could not put my finger on the fact that I wasn't shown um, compassion, love in the way that I have one memory of my mother being really there for me, and I was maybe in kindergarten and sitting on stairs, and her actually sitting with me and walking through whatever it is I was trying to learn,
Mm.
whether it be the alphabet or some math. And so it was a very vivid memory and very special because she was attentive. She was present with me,
Mm.
and
Mm.
that's it.
Mm.
I remember nothing else, and it wasn't until my father was sick, prior to his passing, of which, by the way, his alcohol did, per the coroner, that's what killed him.
Mm.
Was
Alcoholism.
it beat up his heart, not his liver, his heart. So
And when was that? When did that happen?
that was 1990. It was August 2nd.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wow.
August 2nd, 1990. Yeah,
Mm.
and so uh, shoot, where's I going with that one? Um, well, I lost.
I think you were just, you were sharing about how there was like that one fleeting time that your mom was,
Oh,
uh,
right. That was because I knew he was sick. He probably had two or three heart attacks by that point, and
mm,
he had congestive heart failure, and it, at the time, which is my I did not understand this. He didn't want me to know that he was given only 5 years to live
mm,
from, I don't know what point in time. I guess 1985, because he died in 1990.
mm,
So, and then he got sober. He tried to get closer to me again. Um, how many years later? So I think I was 26 when he died. So he was doing things with me that, we went to, football game, because I went to Penn State, so very much into football. And
mm,
and actually, he was the one that taught me about football. I used to sit with him on
mm,
Sundays, and we used to watch the Steelers. And those were back in the days when the Steelers were winning the Super Bowl. So it was a great time to be a Steelers fan and to learn about football. And so I really enjoyed spending time with my dad. It was very,
mhm,
very. I'm sure some people can relate to this. Is you can love them and be embarrassed as hell by them at the same time.
mm,
It's a
mm.
very conflicting, painful experience, because you don't want to be seen with them, but yet, you can spend time with them and love them. It's
Yeah.
very painful.
Uh, he was born with the sun at 21 degrees in Capricorn. You were born with the sun at 20 degrees in Taurus. So your suns were very close to each other, both in earth signs.
Yeah.
When he passed away, Mars was squaring your ascendant, descendant. That's a hard aspect.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then for your dad, like when he died, Chiron, the wound,
Hmm.
was at 21 degrees in Cancer, directly opposite his sun, also forming an aspect to your sun. And then Saturn was conjunct his sun at 20 degrees in Capricorn, aligning with your sun. So it was like kind of like a culmination of the wound,
Yeah.
so to speak, coming to fruition here. Uh,
And he didn't want
yeah.
me to know.
What's that?
Nobody told me that he had 5 years to live.
Hmm.
He didn't want me to know.
Yeah, I didn't want you to worry.
Well, he was already sick, and I knew he was sick. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he didn't want me. He had the opportunity to, and I just thought of this right this very moment. He had the opportunity. He could have gotten a heart transplant. It was
Oh.
early, right, and the times in which they were doing heart transplants. But
Uh-huh.
maybe he thought that I would have, begged him,
Mm.
to have it, and he didn't want it.
Yeah.
He didn't want it. And maybe I don't know if that's in his chart, that he was just maybe, I wondered, he looked tired, right? I mean, he looked
Mm.
tired. So I look back at pictures from that time frame, and I just think, wow, you could see it. You could see
Yeah.
the pain.
Mm. Did were him and your mom together through until he died?
Yeah, they split up when she left. And it's a really weird situation because I kept thinking she should leave him. Now, in that scenario, she was not taking me with her.
Hmm.
So, but I had to go with her. She drugged me with her to move, and we probably lived about, um, when I say we lived, we were apart from my father. At least I was, let's put it this way. She was separated. They were separated for probably about a year. But during that time frame, I spent more time with my father than I did with my mother.
Hmm.
I kept running home. It was my home. And I just consider the dynamics, right, between the two of them. And I hated her. I didn't want to be
Hmm.
with her. And
Hmm.
I wanted to be, with, I wanted to be at my house where my dog was, just where my life was, even
Hmm.
though it was not a good scene. My dad was not in a good place, and probably got worse during that time frame, as far as
But she ended
drinking.
up going back to him. She ended up going back to him, though.
Yeah, and guess who got blamed for that? Me.
You? Yeah.
Yeah, she told me that the only reason why she got back with my father was because her daughter was running wild.
Hmm. How old were you then?
16, 16,
Hmm.
17, probably
Hmm.
16. Yeah. Yeah. And it was a moment of, I, she was walking by me, and she made that comment, and it was intended to be what it was, like,
Hmm.
this is not what I wanted. The only reason I'm here is because of you. And
Hmm.
and it's that, it kind of leads back to that thing about being independent from her, right?
Hmm.
Like, I
Yeah.
was rejecting her because I was going to stay with my father, and so therefore she was left alone at at the place, the apartment or whatever it is where we were staying. And yeah, so she wasn't very happy. She followed me home, basically.
Hmm.
But I will say
Hmm.
this: eventually, again, he got sober, and they moved out of town to closer to the rest of the family, grandkids, and uh, my siblings. And he got sober, and he was working again and doing very, very well. They had bought land, and they had come to terms. The war poem is part of that, where they had laid down their swords and tried to, or no, is it melancholy?
A Melancholy Tale.
The melancholy, yeah, a melancholy tale. Mm. Yeah.
So let's read these two poems, War and A Melancholy Tale, because I like this poem, War. That's, the interesting thing though is like your Saturn, which is the father, is in positive aspect with your moon, which is the mother. So, although your Mars, which is the masculine planet, is conjunct your moon. So that would indicate that, yeah, maybe there's some volatility between the mother and the father, but they were always committed to each other in some way. And so with the connection between Saturn and the moon. So War is, he barely talked, she never stopped. I wondered, is this why he drinks? He never called her name. I listened, but not once did I hear. My memory certain but not totally clear, unspoken messages heard, hidden versions of connection, deafening silence, a knife of many cuts. The elephant persisted quiet but strong, me, a prisoner of their decades long war.
Mhm.
Intense. And then A Melancholy Tale, each with deeply rooted flaws, ill fated, unstoppable failures. She read books about how to be free. That's Sagittarius.
Mm-hmm.
Books about self-love she wanted to believe. That's that Libra moon.
Mm-hmm.
Drinking first helped him come out of his shell, only to one day create his own hell, each lost in themselves, battling their shadows, a day, a year, a life past due. Together they laid down their swords, worked as a team to start anew, the storyline ending unsatisfying to all.
Mm-hmm.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. It is.
Heartbreaking, Jane. Jeez. Wow.
But it is
Goodness.
because what happened is that they finally got out of, Western PA, moved east. He got a job. She had her job. They bought land. They had, I don't know what the heck they were thinking with him only having 5 years to live, but they bought
Mm,
land and they had blueprints drawn up and they were building a house. So that's
mm,
sort of the ending, is unsatisfactory to all because he was actually out on his tractor mowing, taking care of the land. I think they had a couple of acres. And again, they had the blueprints, they had the plans, they were going to be building, and he started to, I guess, feel it while he was on the tractor. He got in his truck and he started driving, and again, there's something. I think it's in a siege. He pulled over and had a heart attack on the side of the road, and that's where he
wow.
passed.
And
So
that's where he died.
that's where it's a melancholy tale, right? Unsatisfying to all. They had laid down their
Yeah.
swords, they were coming together, and then the end came. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was
And
mad at
that's,
him. I was mad.
you were mad because he didn't tell you what was going on with
Well,
him.
that bothered me, but as soon as he passed, my mother started calling me because when I would call my parents, I would say, "Can I talk to Dad?"
Mm. So he left you alone with her.
Yes.
That's why you were mad at him.
Hmm. The wrong one
Yeah.
died. Hmm.
And she was with you then for the next 32 years.
Hmm.
Wow.
And took advantage
That's,
of it, and took advantage of the fact that it's really a dark humor. I had such difficulty with relationships. Now, granted, if you look at my
mm,
Saturn in the seventh house, I mean, I've been told, like, I don't even know with what other transits, and read myself, of course, that my
you have
my
work to do in
relationship would come
relationships.
later in life, type
Hmm.
thing. But I was mad that I was unable to have a relationship. I could not function. And I always, back then I would blame it on, oh, the guys, there was something wrong with them. And,
Hmm.
no, there was something wrong with me and I was choosing the wrong men. And
Mm.
so I, somewhere in my mind, I knew it was, like that subconscious, unconscious knowledge that you have. As soon as he died, she started calling me and I begged her to go into therapy.
Mm.
That's when the calls started. And I would have to
Hmm.
listen to her cry and, go on and on and on and on about somebody that she hated for years. Um,
Mm.
it was very, very, I was so angry. I really was. I was so angry with him for dying and leaving me
Mm.
with her. And she became
Mm.
my responsibility. This is where I was parentified. And I
Hmm.
felt responsible that she was very capable of taking care of herself. But I had to make
But
sure that she was.
That Libra moon needs partnership.
Hmm.
So because her partner died,
Hmm.
she had to have somebody to share her life with,
I was her plus
you know?
one.
And what's
I
that?
was her plus one.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And, that's also kind of the funny thing too is like she left and came back to him and said she blamed it on you,
Yeah.
but really the fact is she couldn't be alone
Mm-hmm.
because she's a Libra moon.
Mm-hmm.
Libra moon doesn't know how to be alone. They have to have that plus one. You know, if they don't have somebody that they can share what they're feeling with, they feel emotionally there's a void.
Yeah, she could not. It was amazing that she did ultimately live alone, but then again, she had me on the other end of the phone, no matter what. But she was good at making friends.
Yeah,
She was very good. I guess
for
that's
sure.
the Sagittarius, right? Some of the
Well, no, it's the Libra
Libra
moon.
moon. Yes, right,
Libra
because she
moon
could be alone. Right.
has a desire to be in relationship. It's not just romantic relationships, it's all relationships. And so, you know, the Sagittarius is a talker. Libra moon is a talker. So that combination, you know, your mom just, I'm sure she could just throw herself at people and they would be charmed by her. I mean, Libra is the sign that represents is ruled by Venus, like Taurus. You're a Taurus sun, moon,
Right.
Mercury, Mars, so you've got that as well. But this yours is a more introverted expression
Mm-hmm.
of the senses. I think that's also like, you know, the horses, your interest in horses is, you know, there's the Taurus frequency. Tauruses tend to have a really strong connection to the animal kingdom
Mm-hmm.
because they are really grounded. But that Sagittarius, that ninth house frequency, you know, Sagittarius is symbolized by the archer, but also the centaur, which is half man, half horse.
Mm-hmm.
So that you have those three planets, the Sun, Mercury, and Mars, in the ninth house, which reflect that Sagittarius frequency. But I imagine your mom was the type of person with that Sagittarius Sun and Libra Moon that she could just, like, you know, be there and just kind of show people, and they'd be charmed by her. They'd be like, "Oh, what's this woman's, you
Oh,
know,
people
what's
love
going
my
on with
mom.
her?" Yeah,
Loved her.
exactly.
Right. She
But
was,
it,
and she was
but
trying to be cool. Mm-hmm.
and this is maybe the work for you to do is to, you know, and I hope that sharing your experiences, and as you continue to do so with the writing, helps you get there. But, you know, it's like that phrase, it's never too late to have a great childhood.
Yeah.
That's sort of the calling of the Cancer North Node, which is you, you
Interesting.
know. And so it's like you need to detach from the I didn't get the attention that I wanted. And because that's your south node in the fifth house, which is
Yeah.
associated with the
Mm-hmm.
fifth Leo, and your Leo rising. I mean, I thought it was interesting. There's a lot of Leo in these poems, like you know, Queen. The Leo's the
The
lion, the
star.
queen of the jungle. Yeah, the star. Yeah. So
Uh-huh.
there's one. Yeah. So there's Queen, and then there's the Covert Star,
Yeah.
and yeah. And
Look at
so,
me.
you
Look
know,
at
and
me.
then look at me, look at me. Exactly. I was like seeing these. I'm like, look at me, the Covert Star, and then Queen. I'm like, this is all Leo right here. This is all Gene's Leo rising. So, you know, and then like who, me, saving me, you know, that's like the damsel in distress drama. That's also Leo. You know, the lion is a very dramatic creature. uh so a heart under siege, Leo rules the heart. So, you know, these are all poems that are sort of reflecting your Leo rising, but also your south node in the fifth house.
Yeah.
And so it's about, you know, the more that you can be logical
Mm-hmm.
about the the experience your parents had before you arrived in their lives.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the fact that your mom didn't know who her father was, I mean, that's an incredible trauma. And then your
He's a
dad
Nazi German
having,
on top of it.
yeah, well, you know, I mean, so, you know, that's and that's horrific too. It's like, well, what does that mean? Was he like running a concentration camp or something? But so there's some shrouded darkness, and that might also have to do with your fourth house is in Scorpio, so secrets
Oh,
about
yeah.
your past, secrets about your bloodline. But then you have your father. He didn't have an ideal upbringing. So, when it's all said and done, your upbringing, though not ideal, was maybe a little bit better than theirs. They did the best that they could, which of course isn't up to the standards that you would want for yourself or for anyone else. But that is also why your North Node is in Cancer, so that you can spend time really focusing on nurturing yourself the way that your parents didn't, but you wish they did.
Yeah.
Now that you're an adult, it's time for you to take care of you.
Yes, and absolutely. The part that I think I won't necessarily disagree with, but I would say that the confusion that I had was that on the outside, it looked, and even sometimes sounds like, oh, well, that's not that bad. We didn't have it that bad. And it's like, well, if I had had one parent be that way, but to have two parents together be that dysfunctional, alone and together,
Yeah.
was where um, the abject confusion in me that could not put the picture together to say what happened, what was continuing to happen, because I was her plus one, right? I was
Yeah.
continuing to be a people pleaser. I was continuing to be the extension of her, the plus one. I just felt responsible for her. And it wasn't until about that June 18th date, that boom, and she was dying. And then when she died, it was a relief. It was, there was, conflict, conflicting feelings about, I'm not mourning her. I'm actually relieved. I don't have to take care of her anymore. I can take care of you
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah.
That's where I was, left. I want to say left off the hook, which is what it felt like. But I will also say that, where you were talking about, now is the time where I can have fun, right? And enjoy my life, which is part of the selling of my house, which I had mentioned, before we had gone live. I'm selling my house. I don't know where I'm going to live, so I'm going to go Airbnb for a while, and I'm going to go to the ocean. I'm going to enjoy myself, and just live free. I'm feeling very emotional right now, I think because I've been talking about all of this, but I want people to understand that, while it's all very painful, and right now, yes, I am feeling somewhat emotional about it. And also, uh, there's a defensiveness that can come out when you're defending, well, was it really that bad? Do you know what I mean? Like, was it really that bad, Gene? And it's like, well,
No, it's not to discount your experiences at all. No, it was bad. No question about it. Awful. Who wants to experience that as a child growing up?
and
You
I
know,
didn't mean that you meant it completely that way.
No, no, no. Yeah. But also, I think all I was just saying was, your parents also had it bad too.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh,
of course, so
absolutely.
of course they had it bad. So, why would you have it good if they had it bad? Because they didn't know how to raise a child. They didn't know how to raise you in a way that was truly supportive of what you needed.
Hmm.
And, but that was part of the design with your astrological code, with Chiron in Pisces in the eighth house. that wound to the unconscious, where it feels confusing.
Mhm.
It's like, is it that bad? Am I making this up? Other people think my family's great, but there's something in my psyche that is like saying this doesn't feel right. And then in the eighth house there's that secret nature. So it
Mhm.
is kind of like a hidden wound that maybe only you can feel, and sometimes, and you can only feel it and other people can't see it. And sometimes you question if it's even real within yourself,
Right.
or if you've just made it up. But it's there. I'm telling you, it's there.
Well, and you think,
And the interesting thing too is that your Chiron is aligning with your sun. So it affects your identity.
mm,
You have
yes.
a wound to your identity. Yeah. You were going to say something else, though.
Um, oh gosh. I think I lost it. I got so involved in what you were saying because it made so much. It all makes so much sense. I think one of the
Yeah.
things that I wanted to mention is that, when it probably started around, she died at the end, or in February of 2019. And of course, the
Mm,
pandemic came in 2020, right?
mm,
And so that then provided an opportunity to do things different. And that's when I started to pay attention to astrology. I always was
mm.
interested, but and had my chart read previously, but that's when there apps were available. There were podcasts, there were Facebook, just lots of ways to learn about it and to start to get the picture as to how wow, there are reasons for all
Exactly.
of this.
Exactly.
and
Yes.
and one of the things that I did, as I had said to you before, is that I looked back at a lot of these significant moments, but particularly with the poems, those time frames, and things line up with what was happening in the poem. And and I do agree that was I didn't have the kids, but I still broke a cycle, right?
Mm,
I was the one
mm,
who stepped up and said, wait a minute, this doesn't have to be this way. And I also
yeah.
worked in behavioral health, by the way.
Mm,
So it was that therapeutic aspect of it. I was very open to getting the help. And
mhm.
without the help, I wouldn't have reached this point. No, no, no doubt
Wow.
about it. But I when I finally was able to connect the astrology with what had happened, not only for me when I had the opportunity to make choices, right? Like, this could happen. I always tell my niece, we're very close, and I say, years ago, I could have made so many right turns, but I just was damn determined to go left. It
Mm,
was just I had to learn those lessons, right? I
mhm.
had to go down those paths and keep banging my head up against whatever wall, for whatever reason, until that one day.
That's the bull.
What's that?
That's the bull.
Yes, yes, yes,
Taurus.
yes. It was gonna,
Mhm.
and then it became a mission that I was going to get it. I was going to figure out the
Mm,
why, and hence again back to that June of 18. It was like but I can tell you that after that produced a lot of panic attacks, because once I
mm,
knew what was really going on, and then I had to change, right, and
mm,
then that will really do something to you. But like I said in one of the poems, it saved me her dying, without
mm.
having to go do the no contact and go through all that whole process.
Oh,
But
right. Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah. Saving me. Saving me. That's the fire was lit, the fog lifted, suppressed anger unleashed. Filled with relief, shrouded in dread, I emerged from false yet real imprisonment. Panic attacked, but fate intervened. Your life hung in the balance. I wrestled my silent but curt No. Furious and befuddled, your power vanished. Freedom arrived. I couldn't save you. I had to save me. What final thoughts or words of wisdom do you have to share with the audience, Jean?
Well, I would say that um, if you think that something is wrong or went wrong, look into it. Don't run from
Mm,
therapy. I ran from therapy twice before this third time, and
mm,
I didn't want to face it. But I can say that also, use astrology. It's a tool.
mm, mhm,
Look at what you have experienced, what you're feeling. Maybe you're not a bull, but why are you banging up against one wall or another, or you can't, or you're tripping or falling, just not able to live the life that you want to live. There are
mm.
reasons why you are who you are, and it's in the code, as you say, Scott. It's in the code,
Yes.
and you can learn a lot about yourself. But as you well demonstrated today, and I have looked at their charts before, but I've not looked at them in the
Mm,
way that you were, with your expertise, able to do today. Um, and I was able to, reconcile that. You know, in one way, I looked at them and I said, could they have changed? You know, was it their destiny to be on this earth to produce us kids, and it was our jobs to make the changes, or at least mine anyway?
mm,
To have to work through all of this, as you talked about, what my chart, what my basic destiny, is, and it's playing out that way. That's for darn sure. Um, but I would say that, take what you're feeling, and number one, don't be afraid of therapy. It certainly does help, but I would say combine it with astrology, and
mm,
learn more about yourself, because therapy is learning about yourself, astrology is learning about yourself, and
mhm.
journaling. That literally got me through a lot of my life.
Beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful. Thank you so much, Jean. It's been a real honor
thank
to
you.
to hear your story. Thank you so much for sharing it with me and the audience. And where can people find the book or find you if they want to connect or buy the book? Where do they go?
They can go to Amazon at this time.
Okay.
Yep, I'm going to be putting
Yeah.
it on other
Awesome.
platforms, but for right now, it's on Amazon. And
Okay. The book of poems is called Pretend All Is Well. Jean, it's wonderful having you here.
thank you.
Thank you
It's a
so
pleasure and
much.
an honor to
Yeah.
be here as well, Scott. I appreciate
Mhm.
it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit. Interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog Lyman. If you're interested in being a guest on the Weekly Transit, you can email me at scott@theweeklytransit.com. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.